Welcome to the Can Innovate podcast, the first ever podcast designed to showcase Canadian thought leadership. These innovators share industry insights, entrepreneurial best practices, lessons learned, and other tips that we can incorporate right into our lives, our careers, and our businesses. So let's get inspired. You know, each episode we produce, I get super excited about how much I get inspired and I learn from others. Like, there's just no shortage of inspiration. And honestly, I love my job. I love doing what I do. But today, I kind of got a bit of a different type of high. In fact, we recorded this episode a couple of hours ago, and I'm still buzzing from the high. And that's kind of what happens every time we get Dr. Cavoukian on the podcast. And guess what? We got her on the podcast today. And she gives us a really amazing update about what's going on in the world of privacy and give us a real good kind of pulse point of where we're heading. The amount of value and information she provides is so remarkable. It just blows my mind. We did talk about the elephant in the room, about a resignation from the Smart City Toronto project and how the world reacted. And actually, it was so cute because I was surprised that she was surprised at how the world reacted to her resignation. But you know what? She's such a lovely lady with such amazing heart and soul and just a woman of integrity. So I hold her with all the highest regard, and so do a lot of other people. She talks about places where they're taking our identity and we don't even know. I was actually kind of blown away and shocked about some of the things that she was telling me. And, you know, it throws me for a loop that businesses continue to do these types of things without us knowing. And, you know, businesses, please take note of all this stuff because consumers are getting a lot more alert and aware. You know, with the age of technology and information and social media, we're sharing more things rapidly and faster. And, you know, we don't want to be duped and we don't want that. There's a huge thing about trust and transparency. So the good news is she's super optimistic for 2019. And we talk about all the different things that are coming into play and other new things we can look forward to. And it looks brighter in future. And that's because I truly believe it's because she has been fighting and creating such a loud noise and presence around our privacy rights. And she truly is the champion and a global force that's really fighting a really great fight. And we really need to support that. She also talks about some tools that we should be using and some questions that we should be asking and so much more. Like, I really hope you guys really enjoy this episode because I got juiced and totally pumped up for it. It is no shortage of being excited when I talk to her, you know. And for those that don't know Dr. Cavoukian, we've had her on the podcast a few times. In fact, she was my very first episode that I actually produced, which was called Privacy, the Foundation of Your Freedom. And honestly, she just opens our eyes in so many different directions about why we need to care, you know, and being that more and more data is being made available, more and more surveillance is happening, more and more artificial intelligence, all those different things. She's actually fighting so that we can actually have our privacy and not get our rights taken away from us without us even knowing, getting us on these lists. So she even talks about how Steve Jobs actually avoided a lot of techniques. So anyways, episode 1 was really remarkable and special for a couple of reasons. One, it was my first episode, but second of all, it really was talking to Dr. Cavoukian, and I was just juiced from that. And after meeting her first time and chatting with her, I was addicted. So then when the EU came out with the GDPR regulation back in May 2018, we got her back on the podcast to talk about the Insider's Guide to GDPR, and that's episode 28. The European Union had really came out with this global data protection regulation, and it was really eye-opening. And for those that want to do business with Europe, and who doesn't want to do business with Europe, we really need to understand that. And she really gives us the Insider's Guide. Now, I know normally I actually produce an episode on Wednesdays. Well, on Monday, she was telling me on Monday, January the 28th, it is actually International Data Privacy Day. So we decided to record the episode and get it quickly launched so we can make and take advantage of this update and on International Privacy Day. So we're doing that. And I did some research on the whole purpose of what this Data Privacy Day is about. And it's to truly raise awareness and promote privacy and data protection best practices. And it's being observed in so many countries. Of course, Canada, the USA, India, European countries, and many, many more. And it's great because as we're becoming a little bit more aware of what's kind of going on and thinking about the impacts it has on our lives, in our businesses, our companies that we work for, our employers, our children, our nieces, nephews, you name it. We're thinking about a lot more things. So this is a really exciting episode, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it because we're going to do it on International Privacy Day. And for those that really, truly still don't know who Dr. Anne Cavoukian, I'm going to give you a quick little bio and teaser about who she is. She literally is recognized as one of the world's leading privacy experts. Like, she is currently a distinguished expert in residence leading the Privacy by Design Center of Excellence at Ryerson University. But her Privacy by Design framework, it's literally the international standard and has been translated into 39 languages. Like, she is brilliant what she has done. She started by identifying a need. She came up with a framework and she kept on pushing forward. And she really has created something remarkable. And companies constantly come out to her. Countries, regulations, they all come out to her to ask her for her advice and guidance. So she is super exciting to listen to. And not only that, she has won numerous awards, such as the top 25 women of influence in Canada, top 10 women in data security and privacy, a Power 50 by Canadian Business, top 100 leaders in identity, you name it, she's been there. So she's truly somebody I have such respect for, admire, and honestly, I think we can all agree is really making a change in the world and is definitely a global thought leader. Anyways, hope you enjoy this episode. There's so much we talk about. Cheers. So innovators, Dr. Anne Cavoukian is no stranger to the podcast, and we are so lucky to get her time because we know she's doing so many amazing things around the world. So Anne, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Sapna, as always.
Oh, well, first of all, I know our listeners, and just like me, is so hungry for an update of what's going on in the world because there's just been so much happening. I don't even know where to start.
Well, I think the good news is I have a positive expectations for privacy in 2019 because, as you know, last year in the European Union, their new law, the General Data Protection Regulation, came into effect, and it is a raising of the bar on privacy and data protection all around the world. It returns control back to the data subject, so individuals should be in control of their information. It strengthens privacy dramatically, and for the first time, it includes my Privacy by Design framework actually in the law, so that's like huge, and I'm just so excited that we're going to raise the bar on privacy because countries all around the world want to be in compliance with this new EU law because they want to engage in trade with the EU, do business with them without any repercussions. And so countries all around the world have already started upgrading their laws. We'll be doing that here in Canada. We can talk about that more in a moment. But I'm very optimistic for this year going forward.
Well, that is great news to hear as we just kicked off 2019. So this is kind of music to our ears because there's been no shortage of privacy issues that have been happening in the news. Like, I cannot get over every time I open up anything, there's something new to talk about. I can't get over it.
Well, there's been a dramatic growth in surveillance in the past year, tracking of all of our activities, our comings and goings, what we're doing online, and it's just been outrageous. And the only good news is that there's been a real reaction against it. There's such a trust deficit right now on the part of consumers. Privacy concern is at an all-time high. I have never seen concern consistently in the last 2 years in the 90 percentile in terms of concern for one's privacy. 92% say they're concerned about the lack of control over their personal information. People are outraged. And that's good because you needed that raising of the bar in terms of people's awareness. So when you combine that with the fact that we have this amazing new law that is extremely strong and will have an impact all over the world, I'm optimistic for the year ahead.
I'm so glad that you're optimistic. Because if you're optimistic, I'm optimistic. Because I'll tell you, like the end of the year, your resignation at the Smart Cities City Lab was just like a boom at everyone. I think that's when the world started really taking notice, going, wait a minute. what's kind of going on. So can we talk a little bit about this?
Of course. And I want you to know, I took no pleasure in resigning from my role with Sidewalk Labs on the waterfront Toronto, the Smart City and Vision for Toronto. And let me be clear, Waterfront Toronto, I've been working with them, and their on-site Sidewalk Labs was on-site. I told them the absolute no break in this deal was that we have to de-identify data at source, meaning the minute the data is collected by the sensors and all the emerging technologies that are going to be in place in the Envision Smart City 24/7, you see, you don't have an opportunity to obtain consent from people because it's going to be going on all the time. The technology is always on. So that's why I said the minute the sensor collects some data, right there at source, it has to be de-identified. That way, you're still going to have a lot of data, but it's not going to be linked to personally identifiable individuals, so the privacy harms will be removed. Then you still have a lot of governance issues, but you don't have that problem. Sidewalk Labs had no problem with that. That was why they hired me. They said, we want privacy by design embedded into the smart city. So great. The problem arose when a number of parties were unhappy with Sidewalk Labs being the only body to govern the use of the data that was collected, even though it was going to be de-identified. So Sidewalk Labs, in response to that, created something they called a civic data trust. And the intention of that was they said, look, we won't be the only one governing the use of the data. There's going to be a number of bodies, Waterfront Toronto, different levels of government, provincial, municipal, etc., and the companies, a number of the IT companies that are going to be involved in delivering the technology. So they said that way, multiple parties will have a say in the governance of the data. But then they said, and of course, we won't be able to control what they do with the data. We will encourage them to de-identify the data at source, but we can't, insist that they do that. And the minute I heard that, that's when I knew I had to walk away. Because if you don't impose this as a must, it's not going to happen. There's a treasure trove of data and personally identifiable data. Everybody's going to want access to the data. So even if one or two companies decide not to de-identify at source, there's going to be a floodgate, and everyone's going to access personally identifiable data, and privacy will just go out the door. And so I did the only thing I could do. I had to resign. I wanted to make a statement. What I didn't realize was, wow, Sapna, you wouldn't believe I had responses from media all around the world, from the UK, The Guardian, The Intercept, from the BBC, a number of companies, media from the US. It was amazing, the reaction to this. So at least it got a lot of attention. And in support of Waterfront Toronto, they never objected to my comment that we have to de-identify all data at source. And they're working on making that the requirement for parties to join in on this. So we are going to make some progress on this. Unfortunately, that was the only thing that I could do at that time.
No, it was great because honestly, this is what I love about you. You are a woman of such integrity. And I think that's why the world took notice of it, because you weren't just like, a figurehead spearheading so on. You've got a point of view. You've got so many of us that were so happy and honored that you champion our voices so loud and clear. And that's what the reaction was. Like as soon as the news broke out that you had resigned from this whole Smart City Toronto waterfront project, that, with the Google, and it was a huge kind of wakening call going, wait a minute, like they said they were going to do all these things. And so, yes, like we really champion everything behind you because you really do fight for our rights. You really do think about things. And this is why we are all so honored to be around you.
You're very kind. You see, I always want to remind people, privacy forms the foundation of our freedoms. You cannot have free and open societies without a foundation of privacy. So we have to take this seriously and do it now.
I agree. And then on top of that, what cracked me up was very shortly after it was about the sharing of our banking data with StatsCan. And it just had a ripple effect. It was like, what? They
don't get me going on that. I could not believe that, Sapna. Statistics Canada went to all the major banks and they wanted to collect all of our very sensitive financial data, including credit history and payments and bills. And it was unbelievable. on 500 million households. That's households. So multiply that times 4 people in the house, and you're talking, gazillions of people. And they refused. The banks are obviously very concerned because we're their clients and they don't want to release all of our very sensitive data. And they offered Statistics Canada. They said, look, we'll de-identify the data. We'll give you the data you requested, but we're going to make sure all the personal identifiers are stripped. So you won't know it's Anne Cavoukian's information or SAPNA's. It'll just be de-identified. Stats Canada said no. Can you imagine? They said no to that. And later I learned why. I talked to a few parties confidentially that were part of this conversation with Stats Canada. And Stats Canada wanted it in identifiable form so they could match it to other data they had. Can you imagine? Oh, it was just so outrageous. So we fought very hard. I did at least a dozen interviews about this, opposing it very strongly. I met with the banks. They all said, we're not doing this. Right now we put it on hold. We're not going to do this. We're in discussions with Stats Canada, but we're not doing it. And there are multiple complaints to the Federal Privacy Commissioner of Canada. And so thank God, Stats Canada put the brakes on it and said, okay, we're going to wait for the commissioner's report and then we'll talk with the banks again. So I'm hoping that the banks full on say, we're not going to do this, regardless of anything. It is just in this day and age to release that kind of very sensitive data that can be tracked and other information can be gleaned. Absolutely not. So let's hope we can maintain that. I will continue my strong opposition to this.
Well, let us know what we can do to help. Now, do you think the banks are kind of reacting to this because just before that, they had all the banks had their own security data breaches that had happened just before that. So this is kind of like a good PR saying, no, we're fighting for the consumers. We're camping behind it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it kind of feels like, this is kind of like, wow, this could be their scapegoat that they get to, rise to the effect.
It's possible, Sapna, but certainly the banks I met with were very serious and sincere in their wish not to divulge this very sensitive information. Plus, they've been hearing from their customers. Like, I certainly went to my bank. I went to TD and RBC, and I said, look, don't you dare give out my information. And they said, no, we have no intention of doing that. I mean, so a lot of the banks did speak out against this. And I also remind you that Stats Canada had a breach a couple of years ago. I mean, they who want to get all this sensitive information, they had a data breach. So can you imagine? It's ridiculous.
I know. I did some research on that because I was actually thrown for a loop to find out that StatsCan years ago had this huge breach that they never really disclosed, that papers are being left in cars and things are blown away and unauthorized people had access to the building. I was thrown for such a loop. I had no idea that that's what was actually happening back there.
No, absolutely. And in fact, the former chief of Stats Canada, he left a couple of years ago. He cautioned against future breaches and that we had to be extremely careful. Stats Canada had to not to share this data with anyone else in government, etc. And that's not the way this current direction is going.
This is crazy. And what else is kind of going on that we may or may not know about?
There's such a growth in facial recognition. There are facial recognition systems everywhere, it seems, in malls, on the streets, etc. And the problem with it, that you don't know what's taking place. It takes place invisibly. The cameras pick up on your faces. They can make a number of inferences from that. Cadillac Fairview last year had, I think, I'm trying to remember how it arose. I know. One of the shoppers in a mall in Alberta, Cadillac Fairview Mall, noticed that when he was searching for some information, it looked like it was capturing his face with a camera or something, but it didn't say that. Certainly didn't seek his consent or notify him. So he wrote to the Federal Privacy Commissioner to complain of what he suspected, and then someone in the media wrote an article about it, and then I got flooded with calls about it from the media. And it's true. They were collecting people's facial recognition at the time that they're making inquiries, where's this shop in the mall, things like that, without any notification or any consent certainly being sought. And people were outraged by this. The commissioner was flooded with complaints about it. So they shut it down until the commissioner issues his report. But the point was, it really brought to light the fact that your facial image, which is so sensitive and can be used for so many purposes, identity theft, for example, fastest growing form of consumer fraud, once they have your face, they can do so much with it. So now there's wonderful research taking place both here at University of Toronto, and I'm on the board of a company in Israel, an Israeli company called DID. And what they do is they have developed methods that obfuscate the facial recognition technology, so it doesn't actually collect any images that can identify you facially. They'll get your picture, but they won't be able to make any use of it in terms of facial recognition technology. It's amazing technology. So I'm hoping that that grows and that more and more companies will see that there are negatives associated with facial recognition. And if you really intend to use it, at the very least, you have to notify consumers of the fact that this is taking place.
Wow, I had zero clue that that was happening. It's amazing how much other stuff we don't know. Like you, I know you also threw me for such a loop the other couple weeks ago, because I think I saw one of your tweets. Because as you know, I'm a big, huge fan, and definitely drank your Kool-Aid, and about privacy issues around these DNA tests, like all these ancestry. I had zero clue about the privacy issues around that. Like I thought, going to one of these companies to find out where my heritage was from and all that stuff was kind of fun. But now I'm kind of like, what? Freaked out a little bit.
Don't do it. Don't do it for a number of reasons. I mean, before I was telling people, don't do it. I mean, of course you can do whatever you want, but I'm just saying advising against it, because it would reveal, they would have your DNA, which is your most sensitive personal information, the most sensitive biometric. And also, it's not just your personal information, it's that of your children, your family, people you're connected to. So I was telling people, be very careful, because there was a data breach on a few of the sites, and that's the last thing you want, is your DNA getting into the hands of hackers and others. But just 2 days ago, there was this story I also tweeted, that these twins got their DNA analyzed by one of these companies, and it was wrong. They're identical twins, and yet it reported different things in terms of the results of their DNA. So it was clearly mistaken. I mean, I've never even addressed that issue, because I never looked into the quality of the DNA testing. So that's like even another reason to avoid these completely, because what you're being told may not be accurate at all.
I saw that. I think that was on the national. I was thrown for such a loop because they were identical twins. Yes. And I think there was like Harvard School or whatever it is, the research, and they were like, no, this can't be, the results cannot be this different. Like, I think one had Russian descent and the other one didn't have it, and the other one had,
can you imagine?
it puts in the question, like, are we even related? It's so
God. And then the identical twins, Can you imagine? So beware on multiple fronts.
I thought that was hilarious. I'm scary and hilarious at the same time. And then I've been watching, like, you know me, I am a crime show, like, junkie. And I also found a couple of episodes where they were talking about where they couldn't find DNA on an actual suspect. So they actually went to one of these clinics that actually people, do this ancestry stuff. And that's where they were able to find the right DNA for a potential victim and so on. I'm like,
God, all the more reason not to go there.
It's crazy. And then
if I can just add, it's all about, I always tell people privacy is a little bit of control, personal control over the use and disclosure of your personal information. When it comes to your most sensitive personal information, your DNA, do you really want to relinquish control to third parties unknown?
No, you know what? More and more that you bring awareness to things, the more and more I'm like, oh my gosh, like it puts into question for me, like even when you go to a restaurant or a store or whatever it is, like when they give you free Wi-Fi. And I have a philosophy that nothing ever comes for free. There's a price. You just don't know what the price is. So I'm like, what are they collecting in the background from me to give me this free Wi-Fi? It's not just my location. What else am I giving? And it puts into that question.
Yes, indeed.
But that goes with my criminal mind. I told you, way too many crime shows. Way too many crime shows.
No, it's a good thing.
So I don't know if you know much about this. I heard a rumor, and this is not based on any facts. A friend of mine was telling me that even at the airports, when they do the scanning of things, that they pick up information on your phone, so they know what you've ordered and so on, and they have certain keywords. So a couple people were telling me that they actually delete WhatsApp and all these other things so that they don't get flagged when they go through the screening. Have you heard anything about this?
I have heard of it, but I haven't been able to verify it. So I don't want to say one way or another. But, the best advice is always go on the side of caution. If you have any concerns associated with it, delete it. One cannot rule out these things. That's the whole point.
So, Anne, what should we do? What questions should Canadians and citizens around the world be asking to make sure that they're protected? Like, what should they be thinking about?
I always ask both offline, like when I go into a physical store, or online if I'm making a purchase online. Before I finalize the order, I just say, oh, by the way, can you tell me how this information is going to be used? So if you go into a store, the clerk serving you won't know the answer. He'll get his manager, he'll get his boss, and the boss will come. And once they are aware of the fact that I'm very concerned about my privacy and that I don't want my information used for any purpose other than completing that transaction, they say, oh, for sure. You're concerned about your privacy? We'll make sure it won't go on any lists. We won't send it to any third parties. We won't do anything. So the minute you raise your concerns to them, you get a good response because they're getting this more and more. So I always say, just ask that simple question and let them know you don't want your personal information used for any purpose other than the purpose of that transaction, whatever it is you're doing. And often you will get a very positive response online as well. So I always start there. The other thing I tell people to do when you're doing searches and things, I always recommend use DuckDuckGo. It's literally the word duck with a capital D's and go, G-O, DuckDuckGo. Because any searches you do, they will not share your search information with any third party whatsoever. So, you would have a sensitive medical concern, some, cancer coming up or something, or, a personal, there's many areas of concern you don't want anyone else to know about. DuckDuckGo will protect your searches completely, and that's huge, unlike the other groups like Google, etc. So these are small measures you can take. Once people are aware of the fact that you're interested in privacy, they'll treat you a different way, and that's how you want to be treated. So just let your concerns be known.
This is fantastic. I had no idea about DuckDuckGo, and now it's definitely going to be not just in the show notes, but I'm definitely going to be using that all the time because I'm so freaked out by everything these days about how much data is there. And data without context. There's just books to be published right there of stories.
Absolutely. But there's also good things coming. So I don't want to just put this as a downer. For example, I'm working with colleagues at the University of Toronto. We're developing something called smart data agents. And what they are, smart data is your personal software agent that will go out and act on your behalf. You want to buy something at Amazon or online, you want to purchase a ticket for travel, whatever. You tell your smart data agent, smart data, go and buy me this on Amazon, or find out what time flights leave for Calgary, or whatever. It will go and do that. All the data that is being made in terms of your request is encrypted. The search it engages in, totally secure, encrypted. You get the results back. Doesn't stay on the cloud or anywhere else. Total privacy and security, and you are in control. Win-win.
I'm excited. Well, let me know when that comes out to the marketplace. I would love to get that on the podcast to find out more about it. And
smart data agents.
Smart data agents. Done. So tell me, is there any kind of other regulation changes that might be happening on the Canadian landscape or, across the world?
I'm optimistic. So for the first time ever, our privacy laws, our federal private sector legislation, PIPEDA, is no longer essentially equivalent to this new law in the EU, the GDPR. And that's a real blow because we've always enjoyed essential equivalence with the European privacy laws. Unlike the US, we have always been above that. But for the first time, it is not happening. So what wonderful federal privacy commissioner, Daniel Terrien, last year he went to the federal government and he said, look, we need to upgrade our federal private sector legislation, PIPEDA. It was enacted in the early 2000s. It's dated. And we need to add privacy by design in it because after all, they've added it in the EU and it was created by one of ours, and Cavoukian. So the response he got was very promising, very positive response. In February of last year, the federal government issued a report called Towards Privacy by Design in response to his comments. So I'm optimistic that later this year, we will get an upgrade in our federal law, including privacy by design in it, which will give us then essential equivalence so that people in Canada can engage in trade with the EU, exchange data without any fear of repercussion. So that's a very positive development.
Well, that is exciting. Like, it's going to be great to see that we're on the forefront and really changing this thing. So this is really, really exciting.
And also, Sapna, for the first time ever in the United States, they're crafting a federal private sector law in terms of the private sector, which they've never had that law before, and they're crafting a national law. So stay tuned, but it's very promising.
Oh, I'm excited. Well, we'll have to chat in a couple of months when we have a bit of more of an update to get the lowdown of what's kind of going on, because this is really exciting. It's scary and exciting at the same time to hear. And thank you so much. Like, I know, not just for me, I know from tons of us that, we really are remarkably enchanted by you, but how much passion that you keep doing and keep pushing things and keep pushing and let us know what we can do to support you. Like, we really...
Thank you so much. Well, what you can do to support me, tell your people, never give up. You never give up on privacy. We just keep moving forward.
Amen. I love it. Well, you know it. So anyways, I cannot say thank you enough for your time. You are seriously a rock star in my books forever. But yes.
It's my pleasure, Sapna. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks everyone for joining in and tuning in this week. Next week, you got another really cool episode. I hope you enjoyed the sneak peek. I'm going to try to do this and see how this works. If you guys are interested, like the little sneak teasers, let me know. I'd love to hear back from all of you. And don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review. And let me know if you know of another Canadian innovator that's doing something really cool around the world. Let's get them showcased. Or if there's an innovation trend that you would like to specifically focus on. Anyways, looking forward to hearing from all of you and talk to you next week. Cheers.